share some experiences on a topic that the Strive team generally, but specifically here in Tanzania, is working on, and is looking at the structural drivers putting young people at risk of HIV. And one of the areas that we're interested is around alcohol, consumption of alcohol. So today I'm going to share findings from our work. And at this stage I should say these are preliminary findings from work that we've just embarked on in terms of looking at the macroeconomic factors so that influence access to cheap alcohol by young people, but also looking at issues around generally norms around consumption and opportunities for interventions that can address this issue. So what I'm going to, this is an outline of my presentation, so I'm going to provide a very brief background, and I'm going to describe the sources of data that informs my presentation today. And then I'm going to provide some data on the general situation in terms of alcohol taxation and the revenue in Tanzania. And I'm going to talk about packaging, and specifically we're interested, our group here in Mwanza, in alcohol that is hard liquor that is packaged in small packets known as sachets. But also very briefly, and these very preliminary findings, I'll talk about what we found from qualitative research that we've done in Mwanza and Kilimanjaro. And then I'm going to point out a few opportunities that we think are available in terms of the interventions to address alcohol use or abuse and young people in this country. And then I'm going to conclude. So as a background, we probably all know that young people in sub-Saharan Africa specifically are at risk of HIV infection. And the literature that is available has demonstrated that alcohol use is one of the structural factors that drive the HIV epidemic generally, but then specifically put young people at risk. And one of our colleagues here in Mwanza, Dr. Joel Francis, and other colleagues have recently just published a review, a systematic review, that looks at problem drinking among young people in the East African region, so covering countries like Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia. And what is interesting, so this article has just come out of the journal Tropical Medicine and International Health. One key finding is that the reporting of ever use of condoms is way above, is about 55%. So in other words, alcohol use is very common among young people in this region, especially problem drinking. Of course, in the review, in the studies that they looked at different of young people. So, for example, students, commercial workers, and etc. But from that review, it's clear that, for example, group alcohol use is very high. I think it was more than 70%. So it seems that from our perspective, from the data from the evidence that is available, and from looking at the context that we operate, especially in Tanzania, for example, we think it's important to look into ways of developing interventions that will limit young people from accessing and abusing alcohol. That, of course, puts them now at risk for a lot of health problems, including HIV. One of the interventions that has been applied in many countries, for example, in developing countries, but also in developed countries, but also in some of the developing countries, is to impose a high taxation on alcohol products. So this is the way of trying to control the availability of cheap alcohol that leads into certain practices of binge drinking and so on among young people. For example, in the UK and other countries, it's a common way. But then, if you look now at sub-Saharan Africa, looking at our economy, our sources of revenue for governments. Alcohol is one of the sort of significant, in some cases, source for revenue. So it's very difficult really to convince governments to impose, to come up with ways of controlling the consumption of alcohol generally, but also specifically, for example, among young people. Because, the more volume that is consumed, it means more revenue to the government, and so on. But also, I think, secondly, it's worth to mention that a lot of the companies that produce alcohol are very powerful. They have a lot of connections and ways that they can make such an intervention difficult. But a few countries have tried to come up with these measures, and Botswana is an example. So currently they have a 30% tax on alcohol or alcohol products. Of course, when the current president introduced the measure, he suggested a 70% levy. But then there was a lot of complaints and discussions in Botswana that led to the reduction to 30%, which is still relatively high compared to other countries. But then, looking at Botswana, obviously, Botswana its population is small compared to other countries like Tanzania or Kenya. But also, it depends on, for example, the mineral sector, like the diamond industries, generates more revenue than these other sources. So probably, at least, they can afford to come up with this going force. But this shows that it's possible, it can be done within this context. In terms of the methods or the sources of data that I'm drawing on from my presentation, so we've managed to obtain data from the National Bureau of Statistics and the Tanzania Revenue Authority from 2002 to 2012. So we are drawing on the data. Some of it was incomplete, but we managed to make good use of what we obtained. We've also reviewed the national budget from 2005 to 2012. So basically, these are public documents. So we went through and looked at issues around projections in terms of revenue that is expected from alcohol, but also any other information. But also we've reviewed finance acts in the country for 10 years. So this was from 2003 to 2013. These normally, the finance acts sort of detail the levies that are imposed by the government each year. So basically, for example, if you want good data on for example, excise duty on alcohol, you would find them in such an information. And these now the Tanzania Revenue Authorities, the authority to go out ahead and implement the collection of levies as described. But also, as I said, I'm drawing from the preliminary data or findings from the research that we've done in Mwanza and in Kilimanjaro. We did it last year. So we are sort of like now completing the actual data processing and analysis, but I'll be sharing with you just some of the findings that we are seeing from the data. But also, for the past year, we've been monitoring what is being reported in the media in the country in terms of alcohol, but also specifically issues around sachets. So we are also drawing from that. Mainly the print media and the blogs. This describes the types of levies that for alcohol in the country, so like alcohol taxation. So you have three main types in Tanzania. So you have tax that is imposed on alcohol that comes from outside, so the imports. So this is what they call import duty. So here, like spirits, beer, wines that is imported there is a certain rate for taxation. And then for the local, you have two main types of tax. So you have excise duty, and value-added tax. So excise duty is normally set on goods that the government or the treasury thinks that are a good source of income, but also in a way they try to control or to protect, to get more revenue basically. So they look at a list of all the products that are in the country, and then they decide, okay, some of them should be taxed excise duties and others not. So goods that, for example, are deemed as necessary, so they are normally exempted from excise duty. And then with value-added tax, I think this is a common form of taxation. So in the country, when we introduced this, it was set at 20%, but currently it's at 18% value-added tax. Now, from our review of the information, when we looked at the Finance Act from 2003 to 2013, we've seen an increase every year in terms of excise duty that the government imposes on alcohol products. And so each year in the budget speech, they say that they're going to increase tax on alcohol at this percent, so mainly the excise duty, but also the import duty. Bigger, if you look at the hard liquors or spirits. And in this graph here, you can see that we've calculated that increase. So, for example, you can see that the blue line is for beer. So from 2003 through 2013, a gradual increase. Of course, in 2004, there was a decrease, and we didn't know what was the cause of that. We also, you can see the wines, so they group them into three main categories. So you have beers and they have wines. Again, we see an increase. So through from about 700 shillings per milliliter through to 2013 to over 1,000. So basically about 1,700. But then the biggest increase, as we've noted, is on the hard liquors. So the spirits. So this raising from around 1,000 in 2003 through to over 2,500 last year. So, and when we looked at the data again that was available from the Tanzania Regulatory Authority and the National Bureau of Statistics, we found that income from revenue from alcohol constitutes 5% of the total government revenue. So although one might say that this is not quite big, but it's significant, so 5%. And we see that the government is looking at this as an important source for revenue, and that's why every year we find that they normally increase excise duty on alcohol products. And when we look at the data, we found that, of course, locally produced, I will show you in the next slide, locally produced alcohol generates more revenue than in imports. So in this slide here, we are looking at the projections in terms of revenue collection. So I think the blue line, you can see the blue line there. So this is what the government was projected to collect in every year. So this data is for 7 years. So from the financial year 2005 to 2006 to 2011, 2012. So 2005, 2006, they projected that over 1,000 billion shillings. So 1 trillion shillings are expected to be collected from alcohol. This is about 1.8. And then you can see now the actual collections, and these are, you can see the sign there. So although it's still sort of the projection and the collection is sort of doesn't match the projection, but at least you can see there's some similarity in terms of those curves. It's only 2008, 2009 that's when what they projected is actually what they collected. and the green line shows us the revenue collected from alcohol taxes, and here we combined. So we combined import duty, we've combined excise duty and value-added tax. And if you read this from your right side, hand side of your screen, so you can see again it's ranging from about 70 billion shillings through to about 210, about 210, 220 in 2011, 2012. So this slide here, we've magnified that. So it shows you it's around 5%. So if you look at the proportion of the revenue from alcohol compared to the actual revenue collected in the country. 2009 to 2010, there was a big sort of dip. We've not been able to establish what was the cause. So on average, you see it's around 5%. And in this slide here, we looked at revenue from imported alcohol. So here we're looking at import duty, if you like. We have two sources of data, as I said in the models. So if you look at the data from National Statistics, that is in the red line there, and then we have the data from the Tanzania Revenue Authority, quite similar. So we think the data from the two sources probably reflects reality in terms of what was actually imported in terms of the volume, but also the revenue. And if you look at the tax revenue, again you see a similar trend in terms of what is collected by the Tanzania Revenue Authority. So in this slide here, we are looking now at internal source. So we are looking exclusively at excise duty and VAT. And here we are comparing excise duty and value-added tax. And as you see in this graph, the main source internally is from the excise compared to the value-added tax. So probably this, in a way, explains why when the government looks at this kind of data, they make a decision to increase annually the excise duty because they see it as an important source compared to the VAT and the import duty. So this slide compares now what the revenue from locally produced alcohol and from the imported alcohol. So you will see here clearly that the locally produced alcohol generates more revenue compared to the imported alcohol. So, if like from the government's perspective, the locally produced alcohol, specifically the excise duty, is an important source of its revenue. But also this observation has an implication in terms of if you think about intervention. So, for example, it shows that if the government gets most of its revenue from internal sources, then it's probably there's a way that interventions can be developed here locally to control access. So looking at the duty, but also the industries, what they're doing in terms of producing, the volume that they're producing, but also issues around advertising. That is just a general picture in terms of revenue from alcohol in Tanzania and taxation. So the key message here is alcohol is an important source of revenue for the government. People have been trying to say, if we increase our tax base, there might be other sources that can replace like whatever percentage that is contributed by revenue from alcohol. And from data, I've not presented data here, but if you look, for example, even the tax from locally produced alcohol, the beers contribute a bigger chunk of the revenue, because of course the volume that is sold is produced and subsequently sold is greater than the hard liquors and the wines and the hard wines and hard liquors. Next, I'm going to talk about packaging. And so we think that from our work here and from looking at all this information that we've gathered, that one way that the producers deal with the increase on tax, making sure that alcohol is still affordable to people, especially from young people who don't have, is to make sure that they package it in small quantities that are affordable for young people. And if you look at the sachets, so the sachets generally have sort of two package sizes here. So you have the 700 milliliters and then you have the 1,000 milliliters. So these are the main sizes that are available in the local markets. Other countries in the region, like Uganda and Malawi, and previously Zambia, also were producing or are producing sachets. But then in 2012, Zambia decided to ban. There was a lot of discussion and discourse around, the effect of this on young people, how it was changing drinking norms and making really young people abuse alcohol. And subsequently, when the new government came in power, they decided just to ban the sachet. So the Zambian case shows that it's possible to have an intervention that makes sure that minimizes access to cheap alcohol by young people and subsequently reducing its effect. From the information that we've gathered here in Tanzania from our reviews and other sources, so the sachets were registered around 2007. So the Tanzania Bureau of Standards, because it is the body that is by law responsible for enforcing standards, but in terms of content, but also packaging. So they were registered in 2007, but it's not very clear. We'll try to really, and we're still researching on this, exactly when did they start to appear on the market in those two sizes. So this is the information that we hope we'll have more clarity on in the coming few months. But then, if you look now, if you take the case of sachets, that is of interest to us. There has been already a discussion at the national level about the sachets and the effect, especially on young people. So last year in May, during the parliament session, one member of parliament called for the ban of sachets, which are called viroba in Swahili. And she outlined she pointed out three main arguments for the ban. So she said that it's affecting national manpower, because young people are now, they're abusing alcohol. They cannot even produce. They cannot engage in productive activities. So it's just wasting the national manpower, especially young people. It's affecting development programs, because young people are drunk, and they can access this, and probably they cannot participate effectively in development programs. But also it creates social problems. So there's a lot of abuse that subsequently leads to issues around violence and other social problems among young people. So that was her argument when she called for the ban. And subsequently, so in a way that put the discussion about the sachets, the discussion about alcohol abuse by young people sort of in the national limelight. So there have been discussions in other forums, but I think after that we saw a lot of discussion in the media and other forums, through the internet and so on, about what she suggested, whether people should go for a ban, whether the government should ban these sachets, or whether the government should just allow them to continue to be available. So two sides basically. So one side supporting the perspective of the member of parliament, supporting the ban, and mainly along the three themes that she proposed. And then there was the other side that was saying, no, we cannot do this to to their head, because now young people will go back into taking harmful liquor, locally produced, such as gongo, which is a local spirit. So now, because we are now used to taking these sachets, now if we ban them and go back to gongo, which is more harmful, we probably just continue the sachets that at least we know the standard that they are used. The second argument was, okay, if we ban the production of these sachets locally, but if other countries, neighboring countries, like for example Ghana and Malawi, are still producing this, then, and because this is already an established drinking norm among our youth, then obviously, the black market will try to meet the demand. So in a way, we are just harming our local industry whilst promoting the industries of neighboring countries. So these were just the main perspectives in terms of support of proposing the ban. Subsequently, so the discussion and reaction prompted a response from the government. So the Minister for Trade and Industry stated in Parliament that the government is planning to take serious problem, various steps to address the packaging of the sachets. So during the same sitting of Parliament, at the end of it, to do this response, and he promised to involve various stakeholders looking at that. So the Prime Minister's office, Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Minister of Education and Vocational Training, Minister of Finance, and interestingly the owners of alcohol producing industry. So he was saying we will consult on the stakeholders to see ways that we can, to explore ways that we can address this issue. But then what we saw after that discussion and discourse, the industry didn't just keep silent. So they came up with a sustained sort of PR campaign. So they also engaged members of Parliament to present their perspective. So for example, one of the producers, that is Tanzania Distillers, which produces hard liquor, and they have these sachets, they also produce them, organized a workshop with members of Parliament, specifically the Standing Committees on Economy, Industry and Business, and Agriculture, Livestock, and Water. So that they had this in the Doma in June. Then, after the Parliament, the notice, and presented, and so it had several arguments. So one was saying, but this discussion about sachets is just targeting us unfairly, because the packaging of a product in sachets is common in this country. So, for example, in this picture here, you can see different products that have been packaged in sachets. So we have like the yellow and green side of sachets, that is tea, but also we have soap, we have biscuits, but also amidst this you can see, I don't know whether you can see there is cognac, which is one of their products from Tanzania Distillers. So they're saying, why don't people just talking about sachets when it's just one way of packaging products, making sure that it's affordable. Also, they say that, okay, this is just a trade wars, because the external industries are trying to curb production here so that they can take advantage of the market. So we must make sure that we don't lose revenue, because as you saw from the previous slides, that internal production accounts for a bigger proportion of revenue, but also will lose jobs and so on and so forth. And that has been sustained in the media. So they've had several engagements of Parliament. They've been doing PR campaign, donating food, for example, and so on and so forth. So that is in terms of the discourse around sachets and the issue of alcohol packaging in Tanzania. And in this slide, I'm just in one slide, I'm summarizing what we are seeing from the data from our studies in Tanzania, and specifically the two sites, Kilimanjaro and Mwanza. As I said, data analysis is still ongoing. But we conducted in-depth interview and participated in group discussions with young people in school and out of school. So for the in-school, we had those in secondary school and those in colleges. And then for out of school, we had those in formal and informal employment. And then in the discussions, we requested them to list alcohol that is consumed by young people, people of their peers, and the rank is like which is most consumed to the least one. So among the top 5, the Viroba or sachets featured in all the discussions that we had here in Mwanza and in Kilimanjaro. So this was quite interesting. And the main reasons that are given for young people preferring to consuming these sachets is because they're cheaper, but also they're easy to carry. So one young pocket, they're working, but also they can have a break and just have a sip without their supervisor noticing. Or if it's someone in college, they carry it in pocket, they might, in between the breaks, they might take it. So the supervisor or the lecturer will just notice that somehow several young people are just getting excited as the days go by. But then, so these are from the data that is collected and that we are analyzing. These are the main reasons for the preference of sachets over other types, for example, beer, or compared to the larger volumes of alcohol that's important. And they purchase this through earnings from paid casual worker and other areas. So in this slide here, I've summarized the prices just to give us an example. So these are the prices at local bars. We went around bars here in Mwanza and took a record of the prices of alcohol. So remember, these are just local pubs, local bars. It's not the big hotels that normally have their own prices, which is usually higher, but then probably young people cannot go and cannot afford to go and have a drink. You have mainly two types of bottles, so the 375 milliliters and the 500 milliliters. And the price is the same. It ranges from 2,000 to 2,200. So now the 375 beers, these are the lagers that are seen as prestigious. So that in a way to make it so like Novu and Castle Light and so on. So to make them still affordable. So you see that the bottles they're becoming smaller. So the price is the same. But then these were not available like 4 or 5 years ago. They were also perfect 500 milliliters bottles. Then we have what we call cheap beers. So these are like the local brands here, like Senator and View and so on. These typically they are lagers that are they have a higher concentration of alcohol, and at this stage they are introduced to the market. They are sold at this price, and in a way, so you take a few of these, like 1 or 2, then you go high. If you mix it with 1 or 2 sachets, then it's fine for young people. They enjoy them, and the idea is they are sold cheaply because at the moment they are sold as promotional products. What we are suspecting after a year or 2, we'll see that the price will also go up. But then at that time, the young people are already used to its consumption. And then we have the hard liquors. So here we have products like cognac and others. So these are packaged again in 500 milliliter bottles. This is sold about 7,000 shillings. That's about 28 UK pounds. And then we have the 200 milliliter bottle. That is sold at 300, 500. 500, about 1.4 pounds. Now, interesting now, if you look at the price for the sachets, so the 100 milliliter is sold at 1,500. So if you take two of those, you will only pay 3,000. But the volume is the same as the one packed in the bottle, in the 200 milliliter bottles. You see. So in a way, and then if you look at again at the 500 milliliter sachets, that's 700. But then if you take two of these, you only pay 1,400. So it's like the smaller it gets from this exchange, the smaller it gets, the cheaper it becomes. You take a similar amount, and these are the volumes for the hard liquors ranges from about 35% to 40%. Some of them are even higher. So for if you're less than a pound, less than even 50p, you can get still a sachet, a 500 milliliter sachet. So in a way, this supports our hypothesis. That's why we're interested in pursuing this. That the way these companies deal with the taxation sort of controls is packaging, but then making sure that the alcohol remains cheaper and affordable, but probably even more cheaper than the standard packaging. So that is the picture. And if you look at what I've presented, we think there are many opportunities for having intervention, structural intervention to control alcohol access among young people here in Tanzania. So, for example, there's already this discourse at the national level about the ban. So this is an opportunity. So if we can take advantage of that and really push that agenda and say we need to do something about this, because already there's a discussion there in Parliament, in the media about that. So we should keep that going and there is zero commitment, at least for the government, to address the issue. As I said, the minister has stated the intention and so on. So at least we can quote and say, okay, this is the position of the government. So we need to look at it and really come and address this problem. There is ongoing research in the country looking at alcohol use among young people, especially, as I said in the beginning, by our group here in Mwanza. So we've done a cross-section survey that in Mwanza and Kilimanjaro that our colleagues are analyzing. So we've done qualitative research. We've done review. So we think that we should present this evidence. It might help in terms of saying we need an intervention here, and probably really as a starting point, we should start addressing these issues of sachets, which we think they really influence the drinking norms around young people. But also currently there is an ongoing process of formulating national policy, alcohol policy. So it's again an opportunity, and in Mwanza, our colleagues here, two of our colleagues are part of that team, already participating. So it's an opportunity to at least to make sure that what we think is important should be in that document, not only the document but also subsequent implementation strategies. So that should be there. So we think these are opportunities that exist in this context at this moment. However, there are challenges, and I've talked about this in my presentation. Yeah, we're bound to see resistance from the industry. We have evidence from other countries, so the industry is going to fight back, obviously. They have a lot of resources and so on. So they'll try to also fund, I think there was a presentation in London last year on how, for example, some of these industries in other countries even fund counter research to actually demonstrate, for example, that in some cases even responsible alcohol consumption can be even beneficial or and so on. So we should expect this. So this calls for our research and evidence to be really robust. and then also to agree the strategies of making sure that we are engaging the policy makers. And these are the arguments that we expect to come from people who invest in different businesses in terms of raising of or selling points. So just to conclude my talk, we think there is need to keep the discourse about the ban of alcohol in the national alignment. We feel that we need to provide data from research, from meta-analysis and other forms of analysis on the cost of alcohol. In other words, so this is what the alcohol is contributing, 5%. But then what is the cost of that in terms of the health problems, for example, non-communicable diseases and other health issues. So we think if we can do that kind of analysis, it will help to provide a perspective of the bigger picture in terms of not looking at just the benefits, but then also the cost. And if we can highlight that, then that will move the agenda in terms of intervention. But as I said, we think we should really keep on providing this and synthesizing the evidence that can really sustain and move forward some of the arguments that and the intervention that we develop. And I think this is the last slide. This is just saying, for example, if you look at sachets, is it possible? It's possible to achieve a ban, and as I said previously, that countries like Zambia have been able to do it. Why not countries like Tanzania and other countries in the wider region? I wonder if the increased taxes balance the inflation rate. Has the relative price increased or decreased? So I think this is an important point. So in terms of our analysis, we've collected data in terms of the inflation in the country for the past at least 10 to 7 years. This information is different, but at least we are getting it. But then generally what we are seeing is despite the inflation, the inflation rate has been quite, it's varied now if compared to prior to 2010 and then subsequently from 2010 onwards. But this is one of the factors that we will look at when we do subsequent analysis. I think it's important. Generally, the price has increased anyway, so that's what we're observing here. This was a comment that they've also observed the problem with alcohol sachets in several countries in Africa. Then have you come across any report or study describing more systematically which African countries that have the sachets problem? No, if we will not come across a report or study that has systematically looking at looking at the different African countries and trying to compare which has a problem. So this is an interesting area that people who are interested in the issues of sachets. So, for example, in Strive, we also have partners in South Africa that might be interesting to see whether and looking at countries like Uganda and Malawi, as I say. But there is we've not seen such information so far. And then I think you also said, what is the role of the international alcohol industry, the big corporation, in the production and distribution of sachets in our country? So for example, I've mentioned, so they have a role, and I've mentioned the Tanzania distillers. So if you look at Tanzania distillers, sub-Saharan, which is one of the big producers in Africa, owns Tanzania Distillers Corporation, distillers company. So basically, yeah, they are involved in that with the subsidiary companies. And is the issue mainly published by local companies or also in the international? I think it's a collaboration. So let me just say, in terms of the alcohol industry in Tanzania, you have a bigger percent being owned by foreign countries. So the bigger producers like the Tanzania Breweries Corporation, the biggest shareholder is Samila. You have Serengeti Breweries. You have Kenya Breweries, East African Breweries owning a big. So it's international in that sense. But then the packaging there is a wide range of sachets. So one of our work here is to document the range of sachets that are available. So some of them they have local names like but then you have the vodka and so on also being available. So yeah, Serengeti is the biggest producers, and then ETB also producing this alcohol.
I wonder about the taxation. One way of keeping up the tax, the value of the tax in relation to the price and inflation is to tie the tax to the inflation rate, to be even more strict on taxing, trying to reduce its consumption. You can add a few percent every year to the tax. Have you been discussing that in Tanzania?
You are right, and I think I'll suggested that we need to look also at the inflation rate. We've been collecting this information, so we have it, and I think subsequent analysis will look at trying to contrast that, and then we'll present that. But then, yeah, I think that's a good point. Looking at taxation rate, vis-a-vis inflation and looking at the actual increase, if like calculating that. So that is the information that we're gathering.
The question from Uganda, it says, thanks Gerry for the presentation. I'm amazed that Uganda has not taken similar steps as in Zambia and Tanzania, yet we have an even bigger problem than these two countries, arguably. The question is, do you have an idea of the alcohol problem among key populations, such as female sex workers in Tanzania?
Yeah, so basically, we have information, for example, on women who work in recreational facilities in the country. So some of our colleagues here have just published a paper and plus one looking at analyzing the data that was collected in Moshi. In that group, the reporting of ever drinking alcohol about 68%, and then 76% reporting taking alcohol in the past. And then in terms of commercial sex workers, I don't know whether we are looking into not seeing a lot of that. Basically, it's like a secondary analysis. So these studies are looking at these are probably epidemiological studies looking at other things like the prevalence of STIs and so on. But then some of them collect information on alcoholism among commercial sex workers.